Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the Muckboots in the Capitol update. We're doing our mid-session check-in today. My name is Alice Morrison. I'm the co-executive director of Friends of Family Farmers, and I'm in charge of our policy program. And this is for the Oregon State Legislature. I want to make sure I always say that for the recording in case folks are tuning in on our YouTube channel. All right, so today we are going to, actually, I forgot to update this. We're going to do where are we in the session? What are the outcomes? A little update on our priority areas. And then we're going to have a budget update, not a small farm outlook. And then we're going to do looking ahead and go over kind of where we are in the session, what you need to look out for, all that kind of thing. So where are we? We have officially passed the midway point of the session, and the first chamber deadlines passed not last week, but the week before. And we are now seeing the fallout from that. And this is the first point in the session where a bill could have died or not move forward in that vehicle. So if a bill did not have its first chamber committee public hearing and work session, which is when the committee votes, it will not move forward by April 9th. So that means there are 4 outcomes that a bill could have in this moment now. And so the bill could be dead. That means that the bill did not move out of its first chamber policy committee by the April 9th deadline. It means that policy concept in that vehicle with that bill number is not moving forward this session. It does not mean that content of that bill necessarily it's not moving forward. If there's a similar bill with a similar relating to clause, things from a dead bill could be amended into another bill. If they're similar enough topic wise, and they wouldn't conflict. That sometimes happens when, for example, in 2023, when there was a senator who we were working on changes to the farm direct producer process exemption, including adding maple and walnut tree sap based products like syrups and candies and things like that to the list of acceptable products for the farm direct producer process exemption. There was a standalone bill that only worked with maple syrup. And even though that bill didn't move forward, some of the concepts from it were rolled into our bill because they were similar enough. So there is an opportunity for things to do that after the deadline, but if a bill did not pass through that first session hurdle, then that bill number, that particular vehicle for that concept will not be moving forward. So of the bills that we've been following on our website and in the session, we have some bills that did in fact die by this deadline and are not moving forward in their current iteration. That includes SB 80, the moratorium on new and expanding large CAFOs in groundwater management areas, SB 747, fertilizer reporting on farms of 200 plus irrigated acres, and HB 2679, reclassifying neonicotinoid pesticides as for restricted use. So these 3 bills that we supported during the first half of the session are not moving forward. They didn't get out of their first chamber. And so they are considered dead at this moment. Ways and means. So the other thing that could one of the 4 outcomes that you could have from this deadline is that if your bill costs money to implement, it has a fiscal impact attached to it as determined by the Legislative Budget Office and whatever agency will have to do the work of the bill, then it could be referred from its first policy committee after a work session could be referred to Ways and Means. So this means that it doesn't have a floor vote in its chamber of origin before it goes down to Ways and Means. Ways and Means is a joint committee. And then theoretically, after it passes out of Ways and Means, then it would have to have a floor vote in both chambers, so to speak. But so this outcome, if your bill passes out of Ways and Means, which is actually not that common, I think that our legislative consultant ran the numbers for us, and about 30% of bills of the thousands and thousands that are introduced end up passing. And if your bill goes to Ways and Means, that bill has about a 10% chance of passing just by the numbers. Because something that's common when bills are referred down to Ways and Means is that particular bill doesn't pass but the content of the bill and the program you're trying to fund gets put into the budget reconciliation bill, the end of session budget bill, which is also sometimes called the Christmas tree bill. So that's where they take all of the other things that need money. And on the next slide, you're going to see how many things that we supported that do require money and are sitting in Ways and Means. And then they determine how many of those they can fit into the budget given the general funds that are available, and bonds and all of those kinds of things. So if your bill costs money, you're down in Ways and Means, and the bills that we've been following that are in Ways and Means include, oh, all of these. So one of FOP's priorities, HB 2164, which we'll talk about again a little bit later, for staff time for the state meat inspection program, that is in Ways and Means because it does require funding from the state to the Department of Ag. HB 2979, the renewal of the Food Systems Resilience Funds, that's the Farmer Rancher, Food Hub, and Farmers Market grants. Food for All Oregonians, which would extend a state equivalent of SNAP to people who, well, this has been narrowed to only children 0 to 6, who would qualify for SNAP except for their immigration status. So if you're not a citizen of the US in general, you do not qualify for SNAP, no matter what your immigration status is. If you're not a citizen, you usually don't qualify unless there's a kind of a cooperative agreement between our governments. But this would create a state equivalent program for children 0 to 6 to have food assistance. HB 3131 is an increase to the Oregon Ag Heritage Program funding to meet the current need for farmland preservation projects that are ready to go. HB 3010 is Spanish language pesticide training for pesticide applicator licensing across the state. HB 2167 is funding for the OSU Veterinary Diagnostic Lab. That's the people who do a lot of the chronic wasting disease testing and other zoonotic pathogens across the state. Considering that we're in a avian flu outbreak, I think it's very important that we fund the OSU Diagnostic Lab. Then we have a series of agency budgets. The ODA budget has many things that we're interested in, especially farm to school infrastructure and equipment grants. That's one that we talk about a lot. The Oregon Department of Education budget is one that we talk about because that has the bulk of the farm to school funding, which is even more important now because some federal programs in this area are being cut currently. And so Oregon, we think, has an obligation to maintain these very useful and mutually beneficial programs. We also see the Oregon Department of Human Services budget listed here because that is where Double Up Food Bucks and the SNAP matching program for farmers markets, farm stands, CSAs, and some local food and grocery stores, that lives in that budget. And the Oregon Watershed Enhancement Board budget that we've been following because that is where the Oregon Ag Heritage Program and the Natural and Working Lands funding sits. We also followed HB 2168, which is for rural septic assistance funds, because we know that if your rural community has folks with aging septic systems that are failing and they can't afford to replace them without assistance, then that becomes a water quality problem for the entire community. And so we want to help folks out if they need assistance replacing those funds so that both irrigators and rural residents can continue to have clean drinking water. So these are all the things that we've talked about in these sessions and are listed on our website that are sitting down in Ways and Means right now. And there is quite a backlog of things that they are going to be going through in Ways and Means. We're going to talk about budget advocacy in just a moment, though. Oh, and the PFAS study. Sorry, one more. So that is a study bill to direct OSU to do a study about land applied PFAS and other forever chemicals to see how that breakdown occurs, what biological processes happen if crops are grown on that land, what's the uptake process. Like, there's just some studying that needs to be done that we support more research. All right. So another possible outcome for this time in the session is that your bill may have been referred to a Rules or Revenue Committee. So everything starts out in it's pretty rare for something to start out in rules. I mean, things that start out in revenue are usually based on the fact that they impose a new tax and create revenue for the state. So we usually don't see things in our arena going through revenue. But we do see things in our arena that get referred to rules if they can't come to an agreement in the policy committee and are not ready to vote that out to the floor, or there needs to be further debate, or there are amendments in the works, or things like that. Rules and revenue committees do have alternate timelines. They're not on the same time crunches and schedules as the policy-based committees. And so referring bill to rules just gives it more time for discussion and debate. We saw this especially with SB 85 in 2023, for those of you all who joined us for that campaign on CAFO regulatory reform in 2025 or 2023 rather. That bill had 2 hearings in in Senate Natural Resources, and then it went to Senate Rules, or it had, I think, 2 or 3 additional hearings, and then it went like further on because it needed to. There was a lot that was going into that. There were a lot of iterations. There was still debate, and you can have additional hearings and work sessions in rules outside of the strict policy committee timeline to enable you to have more discussion on the bill. So we do have 2 bills that we've been watching that are referred to rules, and that would be HB 2548, the Agricultural Labor Standards Board bill, which we've heard lots about, and SB 1154, which is the governor's groundwater management area mitigation and remediation bill. So these 2 have quite a lot of dialogue around them and have been referred to rules committees in either chamber to continue discussion and see where we can land. So watch out for more information on those. And I would anticipate amendments and further hearings on both of these since they've been referred to rules. All right. The simplest answer, which is not always the most common, I guess Ways and Means is also a simple answer. But if your bill does not have a price tag attached to it and it has support enough to move out of its first committee, then it just passes out of its first chamber committee, goes to the floor of its first chamber for a floor vote, and then it is theoretically passed to the second chamber, where it will be assigned to another policy committee, and the process starts over. There will be another hearing, another work session, another floor vote, and then it can go on to the governor. So this process looks like you have to have a first, second, and third reading of your bill on the floor. And that's just kind of a way to guarantee that folks understand something about the bill that they're voting on. There are thousands of bills in the session, so that's part of the process. Rules can be suspended if they need to speed that up. They haven't been so far. And then chief sponsors can also have the opportunity to speak about a bill briefly, distribute a floor letter, which is like an informational 1-pager about the bill, and a letter to give their colleagues context and or more information. And then also detractors of a bill or opponents of a bill do have an opportunity to speak or file a minority report. But it should be noted that once you can pass out of your first chamber, but if you fail your floor vote, your bill is still dead. So you do need to pass the floor vote. It's not a given. So that's why we don't speak in absolutes when we say, okay, it's going to a floor vote. So we do have some of our bills are in this position where they're going for floor votes. Namely, our HB 3372A, A just means amended. The amendment was adopted in the work session on April 9th. And this is our FOF priority commercial garden exemption bill. It is going to a floor vote. It was supposed to be last Thursday, but then with scheduling and all of the bills that they have to get through, they bumped it to today. So we're really hoping it gets its floor vote today. We'll continue to monitor that. Then we have SB 108, which is it extends the crop donation tax credit sunset. Pretty straightforward. This is something that we've had for a while, giving a tax incentive for folks to donate their excess crop to a food bank or food distribution center. And then also SB 809. So that was the one that adds poultry to the state meat inspection program. And that one has already passed its floor vote and has been also already heard in its second chamber committee. So very interesting, very straightforward. And we're big fans of all of these bills. So these are the ones that will go to its second chamber policy committee, and then we'll get to start the process over again with another hearing, another work session, and we'll go from there. All right, so we touched on it a little bit, but just to put a finer point on it, our priority area updates. So state meat inspection, HB 2164. What is the bill? It's to add 2 FTE over the next biennium for inspectors in the Oregon State Meat Inspection Program at ODA. Currently, there is no FTE dedicated to this role. They're having to pull folks from elsewhere in the department and cross-train other food safety representatives, and that is not a sustainable solution long-term, especially for a program that the state has already put so much time and energy and resources into, and that is so crucial to the success of farmers like ours. The fiscal is about $275,000 per biennium. This, I think the fiscal impact statement that's attached to the bill lists costs for the 25 to 27 biennium and the 27 to 29 biennium. All right, so this one, it had its hearing in House Ag in early February. You voted unanimously out of that committee, referred to Ways and Means, and it has been sitting there ever since. So we will see opportunities for us to advocate on this through the budget process and the Ways and Means committee processes that are out there. We'll talk about that in just a moment. So small farm water access. So this is HB 3372A that I talked about earlier. So what is in the bill? As a reminder, the placeholder text was replaced by the -5 amendment. So the amendment is the bill. And that was adopted by House Ag on April 9th. And it allows you to use your half-acre garden that you're currently allowed to water with your domestic well for in part or whole for commercial growing. You can do pretty much now you can do whatever you want on your half-acre, including commercial gardening, but all half-acre watering is limited to 3,000 gallons per day, which according to, agronomists and ag science from OSU and other sources is more than enough for annual vegetable production and other things on a half acre. And you are allowed to use the additional okay, so you're allowed to have a 5,000 gallon per day limit on commercial or industrial activity with a domestic well that's currently allowed. And so this bill would allow you to use whatever's left over after you water your half acre with no more than 3,000 gallons to do any other processes you need on your farm. So wash and pack, post-harvest handling, doing value-added products. So you still only get 5,000 gallons per day total for watering your half acre and doing your commercial processes, but you're allowed to use up to 3,000 of that 5,000 for irrigation and use the other 2,000 for whatever else you need for that commercial endeavor. So completely within the current exemptions, but allowing for a small amount of commercial gardening. Cannabis is excluded as a allowable crop on the half acre with domestic water. Okay, so the hearing was conducted on April 7th. The work session was conducted on April 9th. It passed out of the House Ag Committee, and the floor vote is tentative for today, pending scheduling. We don't think that there's any problem with it. It's just that there's a lot to get through, and this is very common at these pinch points in the legislature. There is no fiscal attached to this bill, so we will await an assignment to a Senate committee after passage out of the House. We don't want to preemptively say exactly where it's going to go. Agriculture issues tend to go to the Senate Natural Resources Committee, so that is a possibility. All right, so now we're going to talk about budgets. So I just wanted to touch on a small farm budget priority that we've talked about several times on this on these updates, but also just re-emphasizing the fact that this is out here, that it is very much not a given that anything in the budget will happen. Given that the federal government still has quite a bit of uncertainty about what will be funded, how much will be funded, and if there are large cuts to human services at the federal level, the state will have to take some action. I think that the message has been that they will not be able to completely fill the backlog, but I can't imagine that they would leave that number of people hanging if the worst case scenario happens with federal cuts. So just want to reiterate that we do need to be very upfront with our budget priorities and telling legislators that these things are important to the community food system and make a big difference. So one of those things is HB 2979, which is the Community Food System Resilience Grant Funds. This encompasses the Farmer Rancher Disaster Resilience Grant Fund at Oregon Community Food Systems Network, the Food Hub, Worker Safety and Equipment and Infrastructure Grant Fund at Oregon Community Food Systems Network, and the Oregon Farmers Market Climate Resilience grant funding that was issued by the state in 2023, and this is a renewal of those programs. So come on, little buddy. There we go. So we would really, we are, it is a priority of FOF to see this renewed. And right now it passed unanimously out of House Ag in February. There was one person who wasn't there, Anna Scharf did not vote on this bill. It was excused. We want to thank everybody who came to the public hearing, who submitted testimony. Really, really great public hearing, showed a lot of community support. Thanks for that. And it is sitting in Ways and Means. And we're going to talk about some ways to activate on that in just a moment. But just wanted to highlight one thing that we're definitely watching. Yeah, so there is an opportunity to resubmit your testimony that you gave for the hearing if you are one of the 250-ish people who submitted written testimony for the hearing in House Ag. You can resubmit that to Ways and Means to help them bring it to the top of their list of things that have community support. Along with these other budget priorities that FOF will be highlighting in a budget letter that we will be circulating to Ways and Means and other legislators soon. Of course, we're going to talk about our state meat inspection FTE priority, HB 2164. We will also be talking about the Food Systems Resilience Grant Funds that we just spoke about, Food for All, SB 611, and then several programs that are within agency budgets and have some additional asks in addition to the agency allocation or the continuing service level, I guess. So there is something called the Ways and Means Roadshow. This is not something that we emphasized earlier in the process because we were very occupied with making sure that the commercial garden bill got its hearing and was able to move forward. But the Ways and Means Committee has opportunities for folks to raise their voice and make sure that priorities that they have put forward get, counted in the record. And so there is one last Ways and Means Roadshow meeting happening. And in person, if you are in Klamath Falls, we can send out the details, but 5 p.m. on Friday, April 25th, there is an in-person event that you can attend and list your priorities. And you can submit written testimony via the Oregon Legislative Information System, OLIS with the Ways and Means Committee, and that can be accepted until 48 hours after the hearing, so 5 p.m. on Sunday. You can submit it right now. Since this hearing date is posted, you can submit that right now into the record, and and we'll put that in the follow-up, and it will be available on our website, because all you really need to do is re-download the testimony you already submitted and put it in for Ways and Means just to make sure that it's attached to that process as well, because sometimes they don't end up talking to each other. So that's an opportunity for you to show your support for any of those programs if they're very important to you. And we have some additional dates that I want you to look out for. All right, so I say Senate here, I mean second chamber. I'm sorry about that. I should have changed that. But May 9th is the date that the second chamber work session has to be scheduled. So, we're just moving along here. So if a bill that made it through the first chamber deadline does not have its public hearing and work session on the calendar by May 9th, that is also a day that the bill can die. The last revenue forecast that comes into play for the final budget reconciliation and approximation is May 14th. So that is a date when you're going to start seeing a lot of information about the budget. And that is somewhere like we are probably going to be circulating our budget letter shortly thereafter, but we want to know what the outlook is so that we can acknowledge that. And May 23rd is when the second chamber vote deadline is. So the work session must be concluded. You have to have your work session by the end of the day on May 23rd. And we have two dates that could be the sine die. We have been told that people are really shooting for June 18th as the target sine die, which is the end of the session where everything has to be wrapped up. Constitutionally, they could extend until June 29th, but word on the street is that they're very focused on getting June 18th to be the actual sine die when the session will end. So we're targeting all of these dates. Make sure to put them on your calendar if you're following the legislative session. That May 9th, things could die. May 14th, we'll know how much money the state has. May 23rd, things could die again. And then June 18th is when the session is supposed to end. So look out for that. Really exciting stuff. We're coming to we're definitely over the top of the bell curve of the session, and it is the time when decisions are going to be made. So look out for that. All right. That is the end of my update, and it is exactly 30 minutes. So if anyone